Hi guys, I learned something today that actually shocked me. The 30p Lee Anderson worked for Citizens Advice in the past. So the fact that he's patronising the poor and the working class about cheap meals and food and warm banks is disgusting on a whole new level. But here Gareth Bacon, a Tory MP, tried to defend Anderson by saying that those who are relying on assistance of food banks just need to budget better. Have a listen to this.
Important. I mean, Chris is right that a lot of people going to food banks are in work. I mean, you know, how do you explain that?
Well, I mean, I've never had to use a food bank, fortunately.
Of course not, because you're an MP, and MPs can claim a load of expenses, but also you're on a salary of at least £84,000 a year.
So people will say they haven't got enough money, but I come back to the point earlier on that sometimes people will have to look at how they manage their personal finances, and there's nothing wrong in that. That's not in any way a criticism of anybody, and it's not patronising to say so.
It is.
Lee Anderson, hang on, Chris, if I may finish, if I may finish my point. Yeah. Lee Anderson's comments are based on his time working for Citizens Advice Bureau. He used to sit there with people and go through their finances and advise them about how they can.
But he was accused of being tin-eared, wasn't he, at the time?
Was he at the time?
Yes, there were a lot of people that said it was tin-eared. What do you?
Well, they're saying it now. Look, I mean, people need to look after their personal finances. That's perfectly true. You have to.
We've had ministers saying, just go out and get that better paid job. Just go and work more hours. It just is not as simple as that. We've had energy prices doubling in a year.
We're at the end of the programme, I'm afraid. Chris can carry on, but that's all we have.
Well, unfortunately, they've run out of time here. But Chris is completely correct. Energy prices have doubled in the space of 12 months. People's wages have been frozen, or whatever increase they have received has not been in line with inflation. So people are getting continually poorer. And the response from Tory ministers is work more hours. But in some cases, if you work more hours, it's going to affect your benefits. So it's not worth it working more hours. And in other cases, working more hours is not going to undo the damage of inflation, because you're not going to earn enough. Complete disconnect. And the fact that Lee Anderson is going around trying to make a name for himself as some sort of money-saving guru. Yeah, I can make meals for 30p. You know, a guy who claims hundreds of thousands, almost, in expenses. Like for this guy here, Gareth Bacon, he claimed from the 1st of October to the 30th of September 2022, from 2021 to 2022, he claimed £184,000 in expenses. Now, a lot of that went on office staff and stuff like that. But as an MP, he can claim food, he can claim accommodation, he can claim all sorts of expenses. So, you know, to turn around and say to people, for example, nurses who are working every hour God sends and then returning home to a cold house with the risk of having their their electricity cut off because they can't afford to pay the bills, and are going to food banks because they have pretty much nothing left. What sort of advice would you give to them? Where can they cut back? If people are going to food banks, it's because they're desperate. There's a huge stigma connected with going to a food bank. Very few people, if anyone, wants to go to a food bank. They would prefer to be able to go to the supermarket and buy the food themselves. When you go to a food bank, you're given very little selection. This is the food that's available. Many times people go to the food bank because they can't, if they go to the supermarket, they're not going to be able to afford the food, but also they're not going to be able to afford to cook the food. One thing is buying it, another thing is cooking it. But all you need is a bit of advice from the people who destroyed the economy and drove down wages through inflation, and are now talking about, yeah, we're going to help you out during the cost of living crisis, when they are simply not. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think about all of this. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.